The winter air above Stalag Luft 3 carried a silence that felt unnatural, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Floodlights swept slowly across rows of wooden barracks. Barbed wire fences glistened with frost, and armed guards marched their endless patrols with mechanical precision. To German authorities, this prison camp was a masterpiece of control, designed to be escape-proof in every possible way. To the men held inside, it was a challenge that demanded patience, imagination, and courage. On the 21st of January 1943, beneath snow-covered ground and guarded towers, a quiet decision was made that would grow into the most famous escape attempt of the Second World War. Luft 3 was not built for ordinary prisoners. It was designed specifically for Allied Air Force officers who had already attempted to escape from other camps. These men were known troublemakers in the eyes of the Germans, educated, disciplined, and unbroken by captivity. The camp was located in what is now western Poland, far from borders and surrounded by dense forest. Its location alone made escape seem pointless. Even if a man reached the outside world, he would still be hundreds of miles from safety, unable to speak the language, hunted by soldiers, police, and civilians loyal to the regime. The Germans had learned from past mistakes. The barracks were raised above the ground so guards could spot digging attempts. The soil beneath was sandy and loose, chosen specifically because it would collapse easily and show signs of disturbance. Listening devices were buried underground to detect vibrations. Searchlights and guard towers ensured constant visibility. Every detail was meant to break the will of escape-minded prisoners. The message was clear. This place would defeat them. Yet captivity did not erase purpose. For Allied officers, escape was not simply about personal freedom. It was considered a military duty. Every escape attempt forced the Germans to divert manpower, transport, and time away from the front lines. Even failed escapes weakened the enemy. This belief kept hope alive. Within weeks of arriving, prisoners were already observing routines, counting steps, studying guard behavior, and quietly planning. On that January day, several senior officers met discreetly inside a barrack. They spoke calmly, knowing the walls might hide microphones. The plan they discussed was daring beyond reason. They would dig not one tunnel, but three, each stretching hundreds of feet beyond the camp fence. The tunnels would be deep enough to avoid detection and long enough to reach the forest. They gave them ordinary names: Tom, Dick, and Harry, so that if overheard, the words would sound harmless. The idea was simple but brilliant. If one tunnel was discovered, the others might survive. Work began immediately, but invisibly. Digging could only happen at night, and only for short periods. There were no proper tools. Everything had to be improvised. Empty milk tins became shovels. Bedboards were dismantled to support tunnel walls. Tin cans were flattened to create air ducts. Electrical wire was secretly tapped from the camp supply to provide underground lighting. Each stolen item increased the risk. If guards noticed missing materials, searches would follow, and the entire operation could collapse. The tunnels had to be dug nearly 30 feet underground. At that depth the air was thin, and movement was painful. Men lay flat on their stomachs, scraping sand inch by inch. The work was exhausting and terrifying. Tunnel collapses were a constant threat. Several prisoners narrowly escaped being buried alive. Panic attacks were common, but discipline was stronger. No one spoke loudly. No one complained. Everyone understood that silence meant survival. Ventilation became one of the greatest challenges. Without fresh air, diggers could suffocate. The prisoners built a hand-powered air pump using bed slats and scraps of metal, pushing air through a system of tin cans joined together. It was crude, but it worked. 4 light, small bulbs were installed underground, connected to wires hidden inside table legs and bed frames. A single spark could have exposed everything, but careful planning kept the system hidden. Removing the sand was even more difficult than digging. The sand was bright yellow and completely different from the dark soil on the surface. Any pile would attract attention. The prisoners invented an ingenious solution. They sewed long pockets inside their trousers, running down the legs. These pockets could hold several pounds of sand. During daily walks, prisoners would stroll casually around the camp, slowly releasing sand onto the ground while scuffing their feet to spread it evenly. The process was slow, exhausting, and risky, but it fooled the guards completely. As months passed, the operation grew larger. Nearly 600 prisoners became involved, each assigned a specific role. Some dug, some removed sand, others stood watch. Many worked on forging documents. Inside the camp, a hidden workshop came to life. Using stolen paper, ink made from melted shoe polish, and stamps carved from linoleum, prisoners created remarkably accurate passports and travel permits. Maps were drawn on tissue paper thin enough to hide inside clothing. Civilian clothes were sewn from blankets and dyed using crushed vegetables and chemicals stolen from the camp laboratory. Security tightened as German suspicions grew. Random searches became more frequent. Several close calls nearly ended the operation. Eventually, one tunnel, Tom, was discovered and destroyed. Months of labor vanished in hours. The loss was devastating, but the men did not give up. Focus shifted to the remaining tunnels. When another tunnel became unusable, all hopes rested on Harry. By early 1944, Harry was nearly complete. It stretched over 300 feet and ended just beyond the camp perimeter. The exit was carefully concealed beneath forest debris. A small rail system inside the tunnel allowed soil carts to move efficiently. Every detail had been planned. The escape list was finalized. Only 76 men could attempt escape. Choosing who would go was painful. Many volunteers knew they would be left behind. The escape was scheduled for a moonless night in March. Snow fell softly, masking sound and footprints. One by one, prisoners slipped into the tunnel. Progress was slow. The tunnel turned out to be shorter than expected, forcing men to crawl across open ground to reach the trees. Guards passed dangerously close. Several times, the escape nearly failed. Despite the risks, 76 men made it out. Freedom, however, was brief for most. Germany was vast, hostile, and heavily patrolled. Within days, the majority were captured. Only 3 reached safety. The aftermath shocked the world. Adolf Hitler, furious and humiliated, ordered the execution of 50 recaptured officers. They were murdered by the Gestapo, their deaths disguised as escape attempts. The crime became one of the most notorious acts of the war. The Great Escape did not change the military outcome of World War II, but it left a permanent mark on history. It demonstrated the power of cooperation, intelligence, and courage under unimaginable pressure. It showed that even in captivity, resistance was possible. Beneath the frozen ground of Stalag Luft 3, ordinary men proved that control could be challenged and hope could survive. Their story began quietly on a cold January day, with a simple decision to dig, to resist, and to refuse surrender. The forest outside Stalag Luft 3 was silent in a way that made every breath feel dangerous. Snow rested lightly on branches, and the cold air carried sound farther than it should have. One by one, men emerged from the narrow tunnel opening, their bodies stiff, their faces hollow from months underground. Each man paused for only a second, listening, before crawling forward into the darkness. Behind them lay the camp, the fences, the guards, and years of captivity. Ahead lay Germany, vast and hostile, filled with checkpoints, patrols, and people trained to notice anything out of place. The escape had already gone wrong in small but terrifying ways. The tunnel had fallen short of the forest, forcing every man to cross open ground. Snow made movement slow and erased the careful timing that had been planned. Guards passed closer than expected. At one moment, a flashlight beam swept so near that several men froze in place, convinced they were about to be discovered. No alarm sounded. No shout followed. The night swallowed them again. Inside the tunnel, tension grew with every passing minute. Air was thin. Men waited their turn, pressed against cold earth, knowing that dawn was approaching. Each delay increased the risk. Each cough had to be swallowed. Discipline held because it had to. Panic would kill them faster than any bullet. By the time the final man emerged, 76 prisoners were outside the wire. It was the largest escape of the war, but the victory was fragile. They scattered in pairs and small groups, following routes memorized from hand-drawn maps. Some moved toward railway lines. Others aimed for forests, rivers, and distant borders. Their forged documents were hidden close to their bodies. Their civilian clothes felt unfamiliar, like borrowed lives that might be taken back at any moment. Morning came too quickly. Snow revealed footprints that could not always be erased. Men hid in barns, ditches, and abandoned sheds, barely daring to move as search parties passed nearby. Hunger arrived almost immediately. Food was limited, and buying it required confidence, language, and luck. Each interaction with a civilian carried risk, a wrong word, a strange accent, shoes that did not match the clothes. Suspicion lived everywhere. Within hours, German authorities realized the scale of what had happened. Trains were stopped, roads were blocked. Posters appeared. Police, soldiers, railway officials, and civilians joined the hunt. The country turned into a net tightening around the escapees. For men already exhausted, the pressure was overwhelming. One group attempted to travel by train, presenting forged papers to a conductor whose eyes lingered just a second too long. Another was questioned by a farmer who noticed their hands were too clean for laborers. A third group was betrayed by a civilian seeking a reward. Arrests came quickly after that. The men were taken calmly, often with relief, believing the worst was over. They were wrong. The Gestapo took control of the recaptured prisoners. Interrogations followed, though answers hardly mattered. Orders were already coming from above. Adolf Hitler was furious when he learned of the escape. He saw it as a personal humiliation. At first, he demanded that all recaptured escapees be executed. Senior officers warned him that such an act would violate international law and provoke retaliation. A compromise was reached. 50 men would die. The executions were carried out quietly, methodically. Small groups were taken from prisons under the pretense of transfer. They were driven into forests or remote areas. Shots were fired. Bodies were burned. Families were later told their sons had been killed while trying to escape. Lies layered over murder. News reached Britain slowly. Then all at once, the reaction was shock, rage, and grief. The men who had died were officers, protected by international conventions, murdered in cold blood. Their deaths hardened resolve and became symbols of sacrifice. The escape, once seen as daring, became tragic. Only 3 men reached safety. 2 arrived in Sweden after a dangerous journey by sea. 1 crossed into Spain and eventually returned home. They carried stories that could not ease the loss. Survival felt like a burden. They spoke for the dead because no one else could. After the war, justice moved carefully but firmly. Investigators tracked those responsible. Several Gestapo officers involved in the executions were identified, tried, and executed. The process took years, but it mattered. Accountability mattered. The Great Escape did not change the outcome of the war, but it changed something deeper. It proved that resistance could exist even without weapons. It showed that cooperation, patience, and intelligence could challenge a system built on control. The men of Stalag Luft 3 did not escape because they believed success was guaranteed. They escaped because refusing to try meant surrendering something essential. Today, the camp is quiet. The ground has healed, but beneath the soil, the tunnels remain. They are reminders that even in darkness, people choose to act. The Great Escape lives not because of how many succeeded, but because of what was dared.